Welcome to the African News Review podcast, where we cut through the noise and get to the truth. I am your host, Adesoji Iginla, and each week we are here to challenge the biases, prejudices, and misinformation in the Western press about Africa. Using historical context and contemporary insights, we set the record straight and reclaim the narrative. Tune in every Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern as we uncover the real stories and reshape the conversations about Africa. This is the African News Review podcast, reclaiming Africa's narrative, one story at a time. Yes, greetings, and welcome to another episode of African News Review. I am your host, Adesoji Iginla. With me, as usual, on my panel, I have Fubara and Eneli Esquire of Yourself Revolution. Kwanzaa is celebration is another book of hers. She's the host of Rethinking Freedom, co-host Women and Resistance. Welcome, sister.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
The Comrade is our comrade in thought and arms and deeds, and he keeps on the straight and narrow. He is Comrade Milton Allimadi. He is the author of Manufacturing Hate, the inspiration for this program, and he's the host of Black Star News on WBAI 99.5 FM New York. Welcome, Comrade. And yes, it's been a long week. Many waters have passed under the bridge. Last week, we had a special with Dr. Gerald Horn, who took us on his, give us an understanding of what is going on in South Africa using his book, Confronting White Supremacy as an Entry Point. And yes, I've been getting loads of comments, many of which I have answered, a lot more to do, but keep the comments coming. And yes, that said, let's begin. The news where you're at in terms of this week, sister.
Thought you were going to start with that brother.
No, I'll start with you.
Well, we certainly have to acknowledge the death of a very despicable human being who sold his integrity. A warmongering. I never want to dehumanize someone, but this is someone who had callous disregard for the lives of other people. He was all for the flattening of Gaza. He's for bombing Iran until they don't exist anymore. He said he was coming out of Cuba. And when people are such hate mongers in this way, I think they have a God complex, like they forget that they too will die at some point.
Right. Yeah,
so when the South Carolina governor says, may he rest in the gentle arms of the Lord or whatever, I'm like, what the? Okay. Right. No. If there's a hell, he's going to stay alive in it and keep burning 1 inch at a time for eternity because of the hell he imposed on people while he was alive. I speak of none other than Lindsey Graham. And anybody who wants to at me, you go look at his comments. You go look at what he wished on other people, right. Children, civilians, anybody that he never saw a war he did not love. Now, yes, he supported Ukraine and was actually just in Ukraine on Friday. But for all of you who are out here expending your life energy hating people and trying to bring about the oppression and the demise of other people, understand that none of us gets out of life alive. So you might as well do good with your life. Putting that aside, in my community, we got a data center problem. Just 20 miles from me, there are over 8 data centers that are being proposed. And our Bell County government is saying, we don't have any power to stop it. They gave these people the first data center that's been built, got a 75% tax abatement for 10 years, and they're bringing in only 40 jobs. 40 freaking jobs, that's it. And there are, so every week in city council meetings in Bell County, there are citizens speaking up because we also have a water issue in this area. Speaking about, what are we getting from these data centers? Now the farmers are weighing in and saying that the bees are dying. There is a constant hum that these centers put out. So I'll just stop with those two stories. Oh, really important one. If you're in Central Texas, we have our John Lewis Day of Action event on Friday, July 17th. Liberty Park, I believe. It's in Belton. If you go on my website, if you go on my Facebook page, I have Fubara Eneli, you will find more information, or just reach out to the Killeen chapter of the NAACP. But we want people to come out. It's important to organize, and that's what the point of this is. We have many organizations who are coming together to put on this event. We want to unify and have a common cause and cause of action for how we fight back, particularly with this upcoming midterm election.
Comrade?
Right. Okay, so I won't add too much.
Do you hear me?
I'm going to be
Comrade?
very interested in seeing
Seems
if
like
we
he's
get any
frozen.
information from the autopsy.
Yeah.
Or
Okay.
Lindsey Graham.
So I'll give my news.
Can you hear me?
Yeah?
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
we
we can hear you now.
Okay, very good. So I am eager to see if we get anything at all from the autopsy. And why am I saying this? You go to Ukraine and you promise that you're going to effectively escalate sanctions on Russia when you come back. And we know that Putin is a master of eliminating opponents by unconventional means. By unconventional, some of these things you can just, breathe it alone. You can touch something, and if indeed, I'm just speculating, of course, if Russia is involved in something like that, it means Russia could actually do the same thing to the Ukrainian leader himself. That to me would be the only interesting aspect of all of this. I mean, how does somebody who, at least according to reports, there have been no reports of health issues, at least recently. So suddenly...
Yeah, they said brief illness and then cardiac arrest. He choked on his hatred.
Right. No, these things can be really induced, and Russia would have the incentive. Obviously, I'm just purely speculating. But if I were an investigative reporter, which I am, but that's not my beat, that's the angle that I would be looking into right now. And of course, even if what I'm speculating is correct, the United States would not reveal that because it would just be too compromising. The U.S. cannot admit that a U.S. senator can actually be felt like that by a foreign country. So we may never really get to the truth until some distant time in the future.
It will eventually come out. But you see what they allowed the Israeli settlers to do to a member of Congress when they changed Rokana.
Yeah, Rokana. Yep.
But on another note, when polls show that Mamdani is so popular among the Jewish youth population, and that most people in the United States now actually do not have a favorable view of Israel. I think Netanyahu and his really fascist government, they're now reaping what they really sowed. You cannot project that much hate on a people, annihilate a people, and think that there will not be consequences from other human beings around the world. And now, even within the United States itself.
Yeah. Over here, the news has been Nigel Farage, who has been under the watchful eye of the National Crime Agency, has decided to call a by-election in his constituency. And he thought maybe that would be one way of him sidestepping the probe. But unfortunately for him, he now has a viable candidate in a comedian, Count Beanface. He wears a trash can on his head, and he wears a trash can on his head, and the odds are very tight. And it's going to be a very interesting election come the 4th of August, when the by-election is going to be held. But, so that's, truth be told, is the news from here. And
I thought you were going to lead with your monarch is making amends with his grandkids. No?
Well, that's no news to me. Sorry, that's no news to me. I beg your pardon. No.
Some other breaking news, and he won't say it, so I'm going to say it. Brother Milton, I cannot wait for your upcoming book on Biafra. Can you tell the people about it and how they can reserve their copy? Everybody Write down this information and go reserve your copy today.
Sorry, I missed that.
Really,
actually.
thank
Yes.
you for that, Prof. Indeed, I have finished the fourth draft. I have it with readers now, critiquing and fine-tuning. And I anticipate publication date to be the first week of September. And the book's title, the working title, is The Day Biafra Died. And I can only, give you a little bit of a hint of what it entails, because obviously I would like you to actually support the book by sending me an email so that I can put your name on the list of people that are reserving a copy. And my email is mallimadi@gmail.com. So that's MALLIMADI at gmail.com. And basically, the turning point was in July 1969, when the U.S. was sort of still playing a neutral role, even though, ironically, Nixon was sort of supportive of the Biafran cause. Even as a candidate, he had condemned the outgoing Johnson administration for not doing enough to fight the genocide, and that's the word he used, against the Igbo people in Nigeria. So when he took office, he found out that, of course, it's one thing to say it when you're a candidate. It's much more difficult to do anything as president. And he was working with a Secretary of State who was 100% supportive of the military government in Nigeria. Go on. So that's his position of the Secretary of State. And the State Department was, of course, controlling the policy, a U.S. policy toward Nigeria and Biafra. And then a turning point came in July when Nixon read a full-page ad in the New York Times calling on him to do more. And it was by prominent Americans, including somebody who later on became at least by large segments of the community, hated mayor of New York, Ed Koch. At that time, he was actually a congressman. And he was one of the people who paid for that full-page ad. And immediately the next day, Nixon was no longer just, playing a balancing act. Shifted 100% on Biafra's side and started giving instructions to his national security advisor, Kissinger. Do this, do that, do that. And one of the most important do this was to tell the French to increase the amount of weapons that they were providing to Biafra and actually do a lot more. And if you read it, you get the sense that he wanted the French to recognize, because the French had been supporting Biafra with weapons shipment clandestinely, though, not openly. I think he wanted the French to recognize Biafra officially, and that would then pave the way for the United States to recognize Biafra as well. He told Kissinger that he wanted all U.S. support for Nigeria to stop. And he said he wanted all the policy to be brought to the White House under his direct control, to be taken away from the State Department. And obviously, Ojukwu and his government, they were not aware of this dramatic shift. And in November, because it was not aware of what was going on, Ojukwu came out on Radio Biafra and blasted the Nixon administration for siding with Gowon, when in fact Nixon had just done the opposite. So it's a thin book, but it focuses on this, I believe, unreported aspect of this war. And that's what I focus on.
Okay.
Well, my people are from the area called Biafra, so I'm waiting. I'm going to get multiple copies and send one to my father as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you for that reminder. Honestly, thank you.
Well, on that 1960 theme, we'll go into our first story, which is Ghana, which comes from the BBC. And it's that Ghana delays the visit of Cyril Ramaphosa. So Ghana delays visit by South African president amid row over anti-migrant protests. There is President Cyril Ramaphosa. Ghana has postponed a visit by South Africa's Cyril Ramaphosa following xenophobic rallies that resulted in hundreds of Ghanaians being repatriated from his country. Ramaphosa has long planned a state visit to Ghana. In the first week of August, it had been hoped it would de-escalate tensions between the two nations. A Ghanaian spokesman, Felix Kwa Okfosu, told BBC that the visit will not happen for the time being. We have sent a communication indicating it will be best to defer the visit in view of the present climate around xenophobia, he explained. South Africa, on the other hand, has sought to play things down, with presidential spokesman Vincent Magwaya telling the BBC of the country's unwavering commitment to deepening cooperation between the two sister nations and advancing the African agenda. So, what are we to read into this diplomatic spat, as they would say? Comrade.
All right. So actually, I like this a lot because there has to be consequences on, state condoned attack on Africans by other Africans. This is totally unacceptable. And I hope other African countries take this similar type of approach and action in its dealings with South Africa. And the article has one interesting aspect that, we should have talked about by now, which is that this is a violation of the Continental Free Trade Agreement.
Yes.
Africa is a signatory to that agreement.
Signatory.
And this agreement is calling for demolishing these borders, increasing intra-African trade, which is currently about 14%, when Europeans trade like 80% amongst themselves. US and other industrialized countries, the trade is from 70 plus to 80%. All of our trade is with the outside world. We send them, we sell, they call it cheap raw materials, but they're not cheap. They're only cheap in the sense that we are underpaid for them. And that's why they're referred to as cheap. Without them, they could not manufacture the so-called expensive industrial products, meaning we are also exporting expensive products by getting underpaid for it. And that is why our trade is so swayed with the industrialized countries. So this agreement is supposed to change all of this. In addition to boosting intra-African trade, intra-African movement of people, right? Because when you talk about trade, you talk about capital as well as labor, which are human beings. So you can't have your cake and eat it too. Condone this attack on people to expel them. I'm reading the same article that 25,000 Africans have now been repatriated. Ghana alone, 900 already taken and 900 about to be returned to their homes. So I'm very happy that Ghana is taking this strong position and saying that, yes, Ramaphosa, you're supposed to visit in early August, but now is not the right time because our people are going to come out and demonstrate against you. So it is better that you don't show up to our country right now. And Ghana is the country actually that brought this complaint against South Africa to the African Union as having violated the tenets of the Continental Free Trade Agreement. I'm totally happy 100% with it. I'm just looking for more Africans to take a step. I mean, listen, I believe in peaceful resolution of disputes, but sometimes when that's not possible, you have to escalate. I don't believe in getting smacked on one cheek and you offer the other cheek. That's just not my philosophy.
You're not a good Christian. Turn the other cheek.
Okay, so a different question for you, sister. Can Africans truly be foreigners in Africa when colonial borders created this distinction?
Thank you.
Well, I think you know the answer to that question. Yes, to the extent that we agree to, we agree with these artificially drawn lines that we could erase when we started to gain our independence.
Absolutely.
But because we always have some of those African elites who would rather be, have a smaller pond so that they can be the big fish in the pond rather than looking at our collective, liberation, we are in the state that we are in today. And so, unfortunately, yes, according to the constitutions of these different countries, Africans can be foreigners in Africa.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Just taking a quick break here on the African News Review podcast, but don't go anywhere. If you're enjoying our deep dive into the real stories behind the headlines, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Every Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern, we're here to debunk the myths and bring you the truth about Africa. Want to help spread the word? Share this podcast with your friends and leave us a review. It goes a long way in helping others discover the real Africa. Without further ado, let's get back to setting the record straight. Okay, so a follow-up question to that. The reason I posed the question is I did a simple Google search. I asked Google, I said, of all the ethnic groups in Africa, could you give me a broad map of how they are all spread across those countries? I'll give you the Southern African aspect of it because it's quite extensive. So in Southern Africa, Botswana, South Africa holds the Tswana people. The Indepeles are available in South Africa and Zimbabwe. Shona are available in Zimbabwe and Mozambique. Toga is available in Mozambique, South Africa, Eswatini, and Zimbabwe. Swazis are available in Eswatini and South Africa. Khoisan people are available in South Africa, Namibia, Botswana, and Angola. Hereros are available in Namibia, Botswana, Angola. The Zulus extend across a huge swathe. They are in Eswatini, Zimbabwe, parts of Mozambique as well. So, being that as it may, now who then determines who you are as a person when you're clearly spread across said borders?
The World Bank does.
I'll tell you who does. The same people who are behind the scenes fomenting all of this dissension amongst Africans, and they always have. Comrade, you referred to the Kissinger report earlier. That Kissinger report clearly lists out a number of countries, including Nigeria, and their concern was if we do not disrupt these countries, they could economically and politically become thorns in our sides. And they said specifically, we cannot let Nigeria have even 20 years of peace because of all the resources available. So when we look at what's happening in Africa and when we look at what's happening in South Africa, Mbeki actually came out and talked about this and talked about an investigation that they did after the 2008 xenophobic, really Afrophobic events that took place with 62 Africans killed, right? He said that based on the results of that investigation, there were minority groups and outsiders that were fomenting this anti-only African immigrant sentiment. Recognize this is not let's go after all the immigrants. No European nation, no Asian nation is sending their planes to come pick people up. It's African countries. And so now if you look at this particular issue that's taking place now again, with social media, they're tracking it and they're saying they're very specific accounts that are putting out disinformation and then stirring up this anti-African sentiment. And then it just like wildfire takes off and goes. Now, in terms of Ghana saying, no, don't come right now, Cyril Ramaphosa, I agree with them, like Comrade said. And again, it's important to understand that when we talk about South African liberation, it was an African project. Yeah. And when I say African, I'm talking about Africans in the continent, Africans across the diaspora came together to put the pressure. And when we talk specifically about Ghana, under Nkrumah, he was one of the earliest and loudest voices for the liberation of South Africa and gave material and diplomatic support as well. And so this could be a great moment for South Africans, leaders, those of you who care, those of you who are responsible, to bring back to the forefront of your people, our people, this history that they're not learning in schools because to the extent that our schools is still, for the most part, Eurocentric, we are not learning about how we did work together, right?
Yes.
So definitely something that I wanted to point out. The other thing that came to mind as Comrade was speaking about the trade agreement and how this can help to disrupt that agreement that was put in place that was signed by South Africa. One piece of good news, although they are going to face some opposition, Ghana, Nigeria, Cameroon, and Cote d'Ivoire have now formed a cocoa bloc. Rather than these countries being able to pick them off one by one in terms of determining what price they'll pay for cocoa, these countries are saying we are working as a bloc. And I think it's clear that is going to have a tremendous impact, just like you look at OPEC and other blocs that have been created in the past. So shout out to those countries for coming together. But here's another issue that I want to just quickly bring up. What happened in the past with the xenophobia, with the Afrophobia, took on a particular tenor. This one now is not just vigilance. It's also become electoral.
Yeah.
Because Operation Dudula has become an actual political party. And you see the South African government acquiescing, if you will. You see their minister coming right out and saying yes. And those Nigerians and others who have been forced to leave, we don't have to, compensate you for any of your property. So now it seems like it's backed somewhat by the government, which was not the case in other instances. And so this is a very tenuous time. And I hope that the AU will not just issue their usual weak statements like they did with Sudan and Libya and so on, but that they will actually bring about some enforcement against South Africa. If you're going to condone this within your borders, there are going to be some repercussions for it. And then I would say for all of us, there are different things that we can do. There are actually organizations fighting back against this. You have the, what are they called? The Kopanang Africa Against Xenophobia. You have the Consortium for Refugees and Migrants in South Africa. You have another group called SERI. I'm not sure exactly what it stands, but these are all groups who are going to court. They're fighting. They're trying to amplify the truth that it's not African immigrants that are your issue. It's actually decades of apartheid and the economic structural inequalities, and that's what needs to be attacked, not fellow Africans. So I'll end there.
All right, so let me just add a few comments to that. This operation, whatever they call them, to do well, whatever, this is just as far as I can sense, the hidden hand of the reactionary Europeans, neo-apartheid. So what's going to happen is they're going to abuse these Africans and have them become electoral force and get some votes. And then, of course, combine those votes with the Democratic Alliance. And now you essentially have them as a majority. And then the ANC will become the junior partner
governing body
in the alliance by the time the next government occurs in South Africa. That's what it's building up to. And this blackophobia is not random. It's very well calculated. You notice they're not going and dragging Nigerian or Ugandan or Ghanaian doctors out of hospitals, right? Have you seen a story about that? No. They're going and chasing the patients, but not the doctors. I haven't seen them dragging any engineers out on the streets. I haven't seen them chasing mine workers, right? So this is very well controlled and tolerated by the South African government. And that is why African governments should take very strong countermeasures for what South African government is tolerating. But at the same time, what can they do? South African government is dominated right now by the Democratic Alliance. So it's a contradiction. Yeah. And then finally, another point on Nigeria that Sister mentioned. Ironically, one of the reasons why France was supporting Biafra was because they wanted a weak Nigeria. They wanted to break up Nigeria so that they would dominate West Africa with the former West African colonies. And the only obstacle was an English-speaking united former British colony with a large population, large material economic resources. And that's why they wanted to break out Nigeria. So ironic.
Okay.
I would say one piece of good news from this, looking at what's happening in South Africa, even though they're using their power in a way that I think is negative, is the power of the people. In Kenya, the people came out and said to the no for this Ebola facility, and they forced the hand of the government and forced the hand of their courts, right?
Yeah.
In South Africa, even though they're outside players that are helping to foment this dissension, it is still the force of the people.
I agree with you
It's the
100%.
people who
I
said,
agree with you 100%.
Rule 38, not even the government. So if other young people in other countries take note and say, we don't have to sit down and just go along with our elites who are compromised. We can fight for our own liberation.
Right.
We have the power.
No, I like that. That's brilliant, because at the same time, you're also actually suggesting that the same people who are now being misguided and misdirected can actually be influenced to take another course of action. And that can actually be done. So that actually gives hope.
Okay. So we go to the next story, which comes from the Telegraph. So we're going from one point of Africa to the farthest point of Africa. And it's that UAE-backed rebels, Sudanese rebels, are now training in Libya. According to the Telegraph, UAE-backed Sudan rebels are training in Libya. A new documentary sheds light on an alleged secret network that is fueling Sudan's war. So Sudanese rebels fighters are being trained to use drones, heavy machines, rocket launchers in a network of secret camps in Libya. Lighthouse reports, a Dutch non-profit media organization, alleged that southern Libya has become a key hub for training the paramilitary RSF, the paramilitary group that has been repeatedly accused of war crimes and genocide in Sudan's civil war. There's one other part here that stood out to me. Yeah. At one of the sites, Camp 17, an LA facility about 12 miles outside Benghazi, mercenaries trained RSF fighters brought to Libya by land and air in how to use drones and heavy weapon systems, according to an RSF defector and Libyan sources. So that said, there is a common denominator here, which is Benghazi was the albatross round Gaddafi's neck. So in 2011, the West, when I say the West, let's be clear who they are, the United States, France, and the UK. President Obama, Nicolas Sarkozy, and David Cameron engineered the overthrow and the assassination of Muammar Gaddafi, based on the fact that the claim then was he was murdering his own people in Benghazi. Now Benghazi is now being used as a destabilizing force. One of the quiet partners in that overthrow was the United Arab Emirates. So, Comrade, what lesson can we draw from this, where an African country has been destabilized and now is now used as a training field to engineer destabilization somewhere else?
All right. So my responses may not be directly connected, but they're relevant. So let's start with Libya, first of all, the destruction of Libya. I think that's actually where, sadly, I lost President Obama, I mean, we follow each other on Twitter, but no, it's true. We actually do. But I could not see him the same again after that. I could tell I was following it very closely, the attack, the destruction of Libya. And I could tell that he was reluctant in the beginning. But you are the president. You cannot allow Bill Clinton and Secretary Clinton, Hillary, to drag you into a war that you knew would destroy Libya, and then the country would be abandoned. And, it's just unbelievable. And that's what happened. So that part is out. And then the second part This is a war that involves too much money. So I feel very badly for our sisters and brothers and, and mothers and fathers and children in Sudan. I will be honest that I am lost for a suggestion on what approach to take. There's just too much money involved. You're talking billions of dollars. We're talking about a country that is essentially already partitioned, with the rapid support forces controlling the southern part and the military government in the north. And just look at how the whole thing is confusing. Egypt supports the military government in Khartoum. Egypt supports General Khalifa Haftar, who controls the western part of Libya, a former senior Gaddafi military officer. The same General Haftar that is supported by Egypt supports the rapid support forces
and is
that
and is
Egypt
financed by
is
the United
helping
Arab
the military government in Sudan fight against. Does it get any messier than that? In order to effectively bring an end to this war and get people to talk and start laying down arms, you need to neutralize the United Arab Emirates part from the equation. And that's not going to happen under the current U.S. president, because his family is making billions of dollars in business arrangement with the UAE. Why would he want to forsake billions of dollars for Sudanese children? Will that happen? So the only question then is there a way to mobilize a mass international movement, right, that makes it too morally repugnant to allow the status quo to maintain? That because the UAE is basically paying off everybody. Everybody is getting a piece of the billions of dollars, right? How can we stop that? How can we generate a mass movement? Can we use the images of the children destroyed? Can we use the images of the women destroyed who are being the mass rapes of women? Is that enough to generate that kind of mass movement that we need? Like the kind of mass movement that we had when we were struggling against apartheid? Because we need to have a narrative that people can identify and relate with too. Otherwise, it's just another war in Africa. And another war in Africa, no matter how horrific it is, that will not work to mobilize enough global mass protest.
Sister.
No, we've covered this story a couple of times at least. And like Comrade said, there are no easy answers here. So I'm going to just share a few that come to mind. The AU could be position itself so differently and is absolutely needed to address all of the issues that we're seeing across the continent. But to the extent that its member states themselves are divided, we look at Egypt versus Libya, the Gulf aligned states versus the non-aligned states, it would require the AU Peace and Security Council creating binding sanctions and travel asset measures, I would say, against the named individuals and the entities. These people are not entities that we don't know. So Haftar and his family members, what constraints are being put on them in terms of the harm they're causing across the continent, really? And then looking at the RSF financiers and so on and so forth. Now, they clearly, and this is just these investigative reporters coming up with this, so we know that the intelligence departments of these different countries have probably even more extensive information, is that there is a physical route. Benghazi port, specific air bases, specific vehicle types, all of that tied to prior UN arms transfer findings. So this is actionable intelligence that they can use to monitor, and the UN could then weaponize that information against those states that are participating. So when UAE just says, hey, we have nothing to do with this, but you have intelligence information to the contrary, they should not be allowed to just get away with saying, if God forbid, I'm not going to use myself, somebody else kills someone, blood on the hands, and you come say, did you kill them? Say, no, okay, and you walk away. That's not how it's supposed to work. Now, Some of us may be old enough to remember when the term blood diamonds came into effect and how there was a distinction between blood diamonds and then diamonds that were ethically mined, if you will. Could we not do the same thing with gold? And again, not any one solution is going to resolve this, but it's creating different ways of addressing this issue. Bringing Egypt and Turkey and Saudi together, because there's this rivalry that is playing out in terms of a proxy competition on the continent, and the lives being lost are those of the Sudanese, right? Yeah. So how do we get all three of them in a room and maybe, okay, yes, you guys still want to be able to get access to the resources, so on and so forth. What is an ethical way to do this? And if it's not done this way, yes, then gold that doesn't have this particular stamp on it, we know we're going to try and keep out of the at least legitimate gold market. And then I'm going to say, shout out to the investigative journalists, and please don't stop, because all of this phone geolocation that they've created, the satellite imagery, all of that, even the interview from the defector, that's coming from a nonprofit newsroom. Yeah. Not from the state, not from the AU. So let's look up some of these entities, because you better believe they're being targeted in another way, and see how do we financially support them. Journalists still have to eat. So how do we support them? And of course, we've got one in our midst. Go look up that email address. We put it in the chat. Order your book today. We don't have to wait for it to go to print. Let's go ahead and order it, because he spent months and months of his time researching this to bring this information to us. And we should do the same in supporting other investigative journalists, because without the truth coming out, we can't even begin to address it. And then, we've got to pray for that region, because it's been just so much devastation with no end in sight.
I think it needs to be led by women. I hate to just put it in those terms, because
brother, we're tired. We've been leading. We're tired.
Listen, the men are the ones who are doing the killing. The men destroyed an entire city, raped all the women. If we can create that narrative, and we can create a mass global movement led by women, I can see that as a possibility that can put enough shame on the pipeline of billions of dollars flowing from the United Arab Emirates. If we cannot do that or eliminate physically the leader of the RSF, this is going to be a very tough one.
Yes, minded the good comrade will be leaving on top of the hour, but I want his take on our very next story. I do believe he's a soccer fan, as they would say in the United States. And the story comes from The Guardian. It's that the French prosecutors investigate racist abuse of Kylian Mbappé by Paraguayan Senator Celeste Amarilla could face charges after French Football Federation complains about social media posts over World Cup match. And so, prosecutors in France have opened an investigation in the racist attack on Kylian Mbappé by a Paraguayan senator, with officials weighing whether to demand that the senator be charged with aggravated public insult or incitement to hatred or violence. Amarilla described Mbappé as a colonized Cameroonian, desperately trying to pass himself off as French, and as a brute who has not learned to write. Paraguayan players should have slapped him after the match, he added. And then, obviously, she then adds, as a racist attack made headlines across the world, Amarilla posted an open letter in French and Spanish to Mbappé on social media. She sought to lay blame with Mbappé for her remarks, citing her anger at his behavior during the match and comment about France ditching their tuxedos to play dirty football. That is not gaslighting. I wonder what is. She said she's regretted mistreating Mbappé with the same insult she had received as a mixed-race person, and she had deleted her post. But she has used nearly half of her letter to criticize Mbappe's response, demanding an apology from the player, accusing him of gender-based violence in what he has spoken about and threatening legal action if he did not retract his comments. Who are you to call me indignant or despicable when you don't even know me, she asked. Let's go to sister first, because I need
No. Now, brother, Comrade is going to leave. Let's Comrade leave first.
Okay, Comrade, you go.
All right. So, I mean, obviously, we know, I believe maybe most people have some level of mental illness, right? No, true. Because we live in the kind of world that you cannot avoid. You cannot be 100% mental illness free, I believe, as a human being in the 21st century, right?
Yeah.
I think her level is a bit, there's no other way to put it, a bit extensive, you see? And it's understandable. And there are many factors. When I read the story, my first recollection was South Africa, where they had the population register. Remember, we talked about this a couple of months ago, where you could actually go to court and petition and say you had the wrong race designation. With me, if I went to the court in South Africa and said, Your Honor, I am actually colored, because of course, the closer you get to white, the more privileges, employment, medical, residential, schooling, everything. So if I went to court back in the day in South Africa and said, Oh, Your Honor, I am mixed race, I'm colored, they would throw me out on the street very quickly. They'll say, No, you're African. Sister could petition as colored, and they will say, Yes, you came in through that door, you can go into that nicer door. That's your way out, sister. We recognize you as color. So this lady, she abuses Mbappe, who is actually even fairer skinned than she is. And then she comes back and she said, How dare you call me indignant? Do you even know me? Well, you started.
Do you know him?
You abused him. Do you know him? You never heard of him until he came and his team beat your team. And then you unleash all the racist torrent. So that's why I say this woman obviously needs help, right? It's very obvious by what she initiated and then how she responded and then demanding an apology. That could be coming from the embarrassment as well, too. But even to tweet that shows that you are not, you're not on par. And I want to be, because mental illness, of course, is a serious issue. I don't want to denigrate it, so I'm not going to say she's crazy, blah, blah, blah. No. But I believe she needs help. The final point I want to make on this is that the French have laws that are very strict when it comes to racism and racist abuse, whether utterances, correct? How come we don't hear about a lot of prosecution within France itself based on this particular law?
That was the question I was going to follow up on.
But it just for prominent cases such as this, where you have a world-class athlete known all over the world getting into a tango with a senator from another country. No. Now we're going to demand that we hear more stories about you applying the same law against racist attacks on Africans in France, or Arabs in France, against Muslims in France. That's what we want to hear. Then we know you're not being hypocritical. So those are my comments.
Sister.
You know what? Our best response to all this anti-Blackness in the world is our personal excellence. What set this woman off? What's the excellence of this young man? I mean, just since he hit the world stage, he's just been proving himself over and over again. And he scored the goal that, knocked them out and whatever. And, people of her ilk, even though she does claim, that some of her people are indigenous, that this anti-Blackness sentiment, of course, permeates not just non-Black people. It permeates even those of us who have some African DNA in us.
Oh, even 100%, even 100% Africa.
Yes, of course, as we see in South Africa. But let me just read a little bit about this young man, 27 years old. Mbappe has an estimated net worth, and it's probably higher than this, between 180 and 250 million. His massive fortune comes from his lucrative contract with Real Madrid, hefty endorsement deals with brands like Nike and Hublot, and various business ventures, including his majority stake in the French soccer club, SM Caen, I guess. His father is Cameroonian, his mother is Algerian, and this man has just come out on this scene and is doing some great things. So the idea to call him a colonized Cameroonian, I don't know what that makes you, because I'm going to talk about Paraguay in a second, desperately trying to pass himself off as French as though that is some type of a flex woman. We're in 2026. This guy has in no way indicated that he does not embrace his heritage, his name itself, right?
Yeah. Kylian Mbappé.
But anyway, so we know that these are racist tropes that have been around for a long time. And as like Comrade said, when do we get beyond just the occasional indignation about what people say and we actually start to take actions against them? So, but I do want to say this, that of course, this is a pattern that FIFA and all of the European Football League needs to look into at a whole deeper level. This is not about
No. Listen, I have to interject here.
Yes.
I have to interject here.
No, please go ahead.
I have to interject here.
Go ahead.
When we have some leagues in Europe where they still throw bananas at black players, right? Adesoji, you are much more familiar with this, but sister just reminded me of that. And it's amazing. So there's so much hypocrisy here to isolate this Paraguayan senator as some abnormality. When you, the Europeans, dress up, you come and you buy your tickets, you buy your beer and whatever, and you come and you sit there. But you came with bananas. Think about that.
Yeah.
Talk about malicious, premeditated. You bought the banana. You didn't buy it even at the stadium, right? They don't sell bananas in these stadiums. You bought it from some supermarket or some vendor in order at some particular moment to toss it at an African player.
I mean, you talked about the banana issue. There is one on Spanish TV. It's a game involving Barcelona. But, I mean, if people Google Victor Alves, so Alves is spelled Alves, and banana, you will see it will come up. They threw the banana to him. He was about to take a corner kick. They threw the banana at him. He peeled the banana, opened it, took a bite, and left and then proceeded to cross the ball out, and the ball ended in a goal. So it was... You can't make that stuff up. It was pitch. And to buttress the point Comrade was making about the false outrage, a couple of years ago, the United Kingdom hosted the Cup of Nations, European Cup of Nations, and 3 black players missed the penalty in the final. Immediately, it was three monkeys, 3 N-words. On headlines. This is national dailies in the United Kingdom. I'm talking, this is 2020. When did we host? 2024.
Just yesterday.
Just yesterday.
Yeah.
So let's start with the hypocrisy. It's not just the senator.
There's a structure, and it's that structure that has to be dismantled. So here's the deal. So she just doesn't deal with anti-blackness. She's also anti-woman. Because after she quote unquote apologized, if you can call it that, she doubles back and then calls him a son of a bitch. And I'm like, why is mama into this? First of all, he was minding his own business, but you're anti-woman as well. So her internalized hatred on so many levels is the reason why she has actually been sanctioned before by her Senate for just mouthing off and saying things that she shouldn't say. But I do want to pull this out really quickly. This is not a little girl. She's 61 years old. She's a Paraguayan lawyer and senator. She was elected in 2023. So she's only been in office for about 3 years. In 2020, she was suspended for 60 days without pay because, again, she was throwing out allegations against colleagues and so on, and they formally sanctioned her. She now talks about, I have received insults myself for being dark-skinned Latin American and called sudaca, which is a slur used against South Americans, especially by Spaniards. So you see how what you experienced, you in turn are doing to someone else. But let's talk about the racial history of Paraguay for just, put me on a clock, 45 seconds. It is not unusual in Latin America because what they have done is effectively erase the Afro-Paraguayans. It's like if you go back and look at their history, beginning with the Guarani, And then you have Spanish colonization, you have the intermarriage happening, and then all of these people now claiming to be mestizo, right?
Mestizos.
But not, and then you have another group that, we're Spanish. But like basically no one, very few, I think it's under like 2% that are claiming to be Afro-Paraguayan. And so there's this whole erasure of Blackness within that culture. And so what we see again, don't just look at the individual, look at the structures that are in place that allow these things to keep happening, and make sure that you are educating yourself differently so that you don't go on a world stage and show how much you hate yourself, like Celeste Amarilla just has done. This has nothing to do with Mbappe. It has to do with how much she understands herself.
So, Comrade, we're minded that you have to leave. What's the working title of your book again?
The Day by Aphrodite.
The Day by Aphrodite. Yeah. Let me see.
I welcome reservation for your copy by contacting me by email at mallimadi@gmail.com. That's mallimadi@gmail.com. And perhaps in early September, I could read a page or two on this show as well. So on that note, Aluta continua, peace and blessings to our global Pan-African family.
Yeah, thank you. See you. Yeah. So, sister, any final thoughts on Mbappé?
Kylian Mbappé. I'm rooting. Who was it that said I'm rooting for everyone Black? It was some Hollywood star or whatever. That's where I am today. So France has 20 out of 26 of their players are African. I'm rooting for the Africans playing for France. I'm not rooting for France. I'm rooting for the Africans playing for France. I certainly hope that I see that Belgium has been eliminated. Yes, good. Yeah. Argentina is still in, and I'm hoping that I haven't watched any of this sports, by the way. I just don't have time, not interested in that way. But I do follow some of, what's going on. But I do hope that Argentina gets eliminated just because of the anti-Blackness in that country.
Yeah.
And let the Africans in France carry the crown.
Okay, we've almost come to the end. One final story, and this would might make you a bit watery-eyed. It's that, and also would call into your calling as a lawyer. So it comes from the Financial Times, and it's that Shell alleged to have misled UK courts in Nigerian pollution case. Long-running trial over blighting of Niger Delta due to begin next year. So it says Shell has been accused of knowingly misleading the English courts in an attempt to avoid facing trial in the UK over oil pollution in Nigeria, according to newly amended legal documents filed at the High Court. The UN has previously said remedying the oil pollution in Niger Delta may require the most wide-ranging and long-term oil cleanup ever undertaken. Shell had maintained that the vast amount of oil that seeped into the wetlands were caused by criminal gangs who tapped into looted oil from its huge network of pipelines. Now, according to new amended pleadings, which has been filed by lawyers at Leyday, they're representing the local who are taking Shell to court, alleged that Shell knowingly gave or relied upon false or misleading evidence during the jurisdiction fight in order to prevent the claims from proceeding to trial. The claimant said Shell presented SPDC as operationally autonomous, when in fact, Shell's senior executive exercised a high level of control, direction, oversight, or supervision over the Nigerian business. They allege Shell acted in concert with SPDC in managing and operating the pipelines. Now, question is, in terms of responsibility, does that change anything?
They want it to change because what they basically have done is to create a legal firewall. And as I was educated on quite a few years ago, he who owns the gold writes the rules, something like that. That was their version of the golden rule. And so in creating this Nigerian subsidiary SBTC, what Shell is basically arguing is, hey, we don't have anything to do with it. They're the ones. And so you guys fight this out in Nigeria. Now, what they're not doing is showing how the profits flowed back to London.
Follow the money.
Or that the major decision-making is still back in London, right?
Yes.
And of course, what they're also counting on is that the Nigerian courts are so under-resourced that they would not really be able to
do the forensic.
Yes. The forensic investigation that need to take place, even getting access to some of these documents, because obviously if the decision-making is happening in London, what power does the Nigerian government, even if they were fully resourced, have to compel discovery, which is a major part of any litigation? So it's a structural mechanism again for keeping the profits centralized in London and that metropole, while keeping the liability localized in the periphery. So you're going to extract, take the resources, take the money, and then say, hey, we didn't have anything to do with it. You can hide your hand. And so these particular litigants, these plaintiffs, decided not to pursue this in the Nigerian courts, where they have these kind of cases repeatedly lose in Nigeria. Unfortunately, too many of our judges are also compromised. Need to be careful how I say this. But the litigation is slow, costly. My father was once involved in a case that lasted over 20 years with no resolution, and you were paying attorneys the whole time, And so that's why the BA, Ogale communities and Bodo before them have decided to sue in London. And then you actually have a case where the Nigerian farmers sued in the Netherlands because that venue can actually enforce disclosure and hold a company to account in their courts. Their courts can do that in a way that the Nigerian courts cannot. Having said that, I don't think that anybody who pays attention to history in any way is surprised that Shell lied. For the cleanup that we're talking about, and we've covered this story before, the devastation is going to last for at least another 500 years. Like what it takes to come back from that, if you can ever come back. Those communities, which I shared earlier about, even the environment, my community is not too far from
proximity to.
Yes. The fish, the animals, the plants, the way everything has been destroyed. And so they know this is a huge payout if it's done properly. So I understand why Shell is fighting in the way that the way it is. But it should come as a shock to nobody that, of course, they're hiding the information that will convict them. It was done here in the U.S. The tobacco companies knew for decades that they were poisoning and killing people. And they did everything within their power to hide that information and prevent it from coming out to the light of day. And so, these communities are probably represented, actually, we researched it before, they are represented by, a white law firm over there. But to the extent that we can get justice on some level for the people living and for the generations to come, I really don't care who's fighting the battle. Let's get some wins.
Yes, let's get some wins. And speaking of winning, England did win yesterday. Excuse me. So
my only question: how many Africans do you have playing for England?
We do have quite a couple. Jude Bellingham, Ned Spence. Who else? What's his name? Hold on.
So the EU isn't trying to get rid of these immigrants.
No. I mean, they're useful. They're useful until when they're no longer
useful. Negroes. Okay, until they tear meniscus or something.
True.
But brothers, get your money.
That's it.
Try to marry black if you can.
Good. I wish you luck on that one.
Put your resources into building something that is lasting.
No, most of them play snow. So most of them play with snow. So
Well, listen. All human beings are human beings, but I'm just saying strategically, we need to keep more of our own resources to help rebuild, because we've been extracted from for so long. So don't allow yourself to be extracted from as well in that way.
True.
Saying.
Yeah, on that very inspiring note, we have come to the end of this week's episode of African News Review. In the course of the week, Sister and I will be looking at the life and times of Florence Kennedy, who she is, what she's about. Join us 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Wednesday as we walk her times and life.
Can I just add something really quickly?
Sure,
I know
you can.
over time here. Comrade was talking about, the women should lead. And what we can see from Women in Resistance, I don't know how many women we've done now, at least over 60, right? Something you're better at keeping count than I am. These are women from all walks of life who did it in so many different ways with so many, just different talents, whatever they had at their disposal. And I truly want to encourage people, come support, spread the news. Because if we're saying women should do it again, women need to remember that they've done it before and how they did it. And then also for our brothers, come and learn, because what we see time and time again in the stories of these women is that the men in their lives sometimes have been the major stumbling block. Shout out to all the fathers who supported the dreams of their daughters and so on and so forth. We've had quite a few of those, but we've seen a lot of romantic partners who have just not been able to stand side by side with these women who, made a lot of sacrifices to fight for some of the things that we enjoy today. So spread the word. Let's get more people listening, because we can't say, oh, I'm pro-woman or I'm pro-this, and we don't know anything about, or very little. We can name Ida B. Wells and Fannie Lou Hamer and Harriet Tubman, and then we're out of names. We need to do better. So please log in, learn, and hopefully it inspires you to do more research. Many of them still need to be written about extensively. And if we don't do it, who's supposed to?
And yes, these women, the stories about these women is an entry point for people to get to know them more. And all walks of life, writing, growing food. I mean, everyone is there. So
dancing, politics, law,
journalism, writing, leading people in war. So you'd be surprised. So 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Wednesday, Women in Resistance. That's it. Any final thoughts, sister?
Let's just keep grounding ourselves in our humanity, in our own history, and let's actually try to live what we speak, because we can talk about the dissension out there, but how are we operating within our own personal relationships? How are we fomenting dissension in our own personal relationships? Because if we can't figure it out on an individual level, how do we figure it out at the level of a nation? So,
true. Thank you. And from me, it's good night and God bless. That's a wrap for this week on the African News Review Podcast. We hope you are leaving with a clearer, more truthful picture of Africa. Remember, every story has another side, and we're here to uncover it. Don't forget to join us next Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern as we continue to challenge the narratives and reclaim Africa's voice. If you've enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe, share, and leave us a review. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep seeing Africa for what it truly is.